5 players that I love in this upcoming 2025 Dynasty rookie class. That's what we're talking about in today's video. Make sure to give us a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, especially if you enjoy Dynasty content. We put it out all off season and during the season as well. We are 17 subscribers away from 1,000. It would be awesome if we can get there by the end of the month. Appreciate you all. And join our Discord. Link is in the description. It's free. Get in there. We'll put together some listener leagues and do some Dynasty startups here soon if we get enough people in there. But today we're talking about, I don't want to call them sleepers because it's too early to classify players as sleepers, in my opinion. It's January 11th. The NFL playoffs are happening. We don't even know who's all committing to this draft class. There's still some guys that we're still going to wait to hear from. Combine hasn't happened. There's still a lot that can happen. So to call these guys sleepers, I think, it's a little bit disingenuous. And I just don't think it's really what I'm trying to get at here. But it's 5 players that I really like that I feel like I'm a little bit higher on than consensus out there as of right now, where we stand on January 11th. I have 5 players for you. Like I said, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a tight end. Let's just jump right into it, guys. Starting off at the running back position, Jaylin Sampson out of Tennessee is someone that I am very, very high on. Now, you have to be careful when it comes to running back rankings and when you watch content creators and draft experts and their rankings and running backs. This running back class is so deep. So you obviously have guys like Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton, Caleb Johnson, and even guys like Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. And then after that, you could probably put like 10 running backs into one tier. So like having RB7 and RB15, they could all kind of be in the same tier. So you have to be careful, saying that someone's too low on a guy. But Jaylin Sampson's a guy that I feel like should get a little bit more love. Just a little bit about Jaylin Sampson here before I go over the numbers. He was a 4-star recruit, went to Tennessee. Got on the field his freshman year, didn't get a whole lot of carries and things like that, but did get on the field. But his first 2 years in college, he was basically playing behind Jaylen Wright, who we know was drafted in the 4th round to the Miami Dolphins. And then he finally got his opportunity. That being said, last year in 2023, even though he did play behind Jaylen Wright, he still had a pretty productive year. Jaylin Sampson did. So it's not like he didn't do anything until this year. He was still decently productive out there. Specifically, he rushed for 600 yards and had another 175 yards receiving with 8 total touchdowns. Now, then he took over in 2024 as the main guy, and you see the numbers there. Over 250 carries, almost 1,500 yards rushing, 22 touchdowns, 20 catches for 143 yards. A couple of his things here. You see the dominator percentage there. His career dominator, that's just basically taking into account 2 years, is 25%. What is dominator? It's the percentage for running backs in particular. It's the percentage of your team's total offense. What percentage of the team's total offense did you account for, both rushing and receiving? In his 2 years where he got some work, Jaylin Sampson accounted for 25% of Tennessee's offense. And last year in 2024, 34%. And he's young. His breakout age was 19. I believe he's still 20 years old. Maybe he turned 21, but he's still relatively young for a draft prospect. We see some of the numbers there. Elusive rating. What is elusive rating? Elusive rating is your ability to force missed tackles independent of blocking. This is a PFF stat. I went back and looked over the last 10 years or so. What is the average number for players coming out of college who hit in the NFL, who were fantasy relevant in the NFL? What was the average number for their elusive rating? It was 94.8. You can see here Jaylin Sampson's 107.5. Why is it important? Well, guys who can force missed tackles, usually that translates to the NFL. A couple players that were really high last year was Bucky Irving was one of them. I think he was the highest in last year's draft class. So we obviously saw him hit and a couple other guys. Marshawn Lloyd was pretty high. We just didn't really get to see him. So he has a really good elusive rating. It's not elite. Elite is when you start getting above like 115, 120 in that number. This is 107. It's definitely above average. Breakaway percentage. What percentage of your yards come from runs that are 15 yards or longer? He's at 30.4%, which isn't quite as high as you'd like to see. It shows explosiveness, right? It shows how explosive you are. Not quite there for Jaylin Sampson, 30.4. We want to see that a little bit higher. So he's a smaller back. He's 5'11", 201, and he's projected to run pretty fast. If I remember correctly, reading, and I'm just going to double check here. He's projected to run in the mid 4.3s, so we'll check that for the combine. So you'd expect him to be a little bit more explosive, but not quite. And then you see all the other numbers there. Overall, I really like Dylan Sampson. I think he's super, super productive. I think because of how deep this running back draft class is, he might get overlooked a little bit, and maybe you can scoop him up in the late second, early third. And I think whatever team he goes to, he has a chance to be a significant contributor on NFL teams. We will be breaking down each individual prospect a little bit more, going over film and all of that. I'll be making videos specifically on just Dylan Sampson later on in the season, but this is more of just a taste, an introduction of these guys that I want to get you to, and start to get your starts to get you to thinking about these guys, because it's draft season. It's time to start thinking about them. R.J. Harvey out of UCF. He's 5'9", 208, so he's built, right? You can see in the picture there alone, like the guy is pretty damn built. R.J. Harvey's very interesting. He's an older prospect. I don't know his exact age. I can't find what his exact age is, but R.J. Harvey entered. He played he was a dual threat quarterback in high school, and he actually committed to Virginia in 2019. So he's been in college since 2019. So I imagine he's at least 23 years old. Maybe he's 24. So he is a little bit older. So that is going to drop him down in draft boards a little bit. But anyways, he went to Virginia as a dual threat quarterback. He didn't get on the field. I think he was like third or fourth string. And then he transferred to UCF. And his first year at UCF was the COVID year. So obviously everything was a little wonky there. And then he was entering 2021 as the favorite to take over the starting job, tears his ACL. Doesn't play in 2021. So we really didn't get to see R.J. Harvey play until 2022, even though he entered college in 2019, just for other reasons, injuries, COVID, switching positions, all of that stuff. And the moment he started to get some work in 2022, he was productive. 800 yards rushing, over 1,000 total yards in 2022, his junior year. His senior year, his redshirt senior year, he had over 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns. And then this last year, as you can see there, guy accounted for over 1,800, almost 1,850 total yards with 25 touchdowns. Just incredibly, incredibly productive. You see the career dominator there for him. His career dominator is 29%, so he accounted for 29% of UCF's offense over the last 3 seasons. And his single season high is 43%, guys. He accounted for 43% of UCF's offense in 2024. Breakout age, I think, is 22, but we don't know his exact age. It could be a little bit older. You see the elusive rating. I just talked about that. He's even better. He's kind of getting into that elite category of his ability to break tackles. His breakaway percentage shows his explosiveness. So he 50% of his yards came on his rushing yards came on runs of 15 yards or more. That's pretty crazy. That means he's very, very explosive runner, which is great to see. Yards after contact, almost 4 yards after contact. I think he could be a workhorse running back. He's going to run, I think, in the low 4.4s. We don't know for sure. This is all estimation, but I think he's going to run in the low 4.4s. He's also going to get a little bit overlooked because he's an older prospect. This running back class is super deep. But, man, I just think depending on the team he goes to, he has a chance to win the job. I think he can be a workhorse guy, and just kind of starting to scout him, and I want to get more into it. But I think he has the build to be a 3-down guy. He's quick, laterally, really good jump cut is what I noticed in the few games that I watched him. Is he a little bit undersized? Yes, but I'm kind of moving past the, like, if a player shows, A, he can carry the load, which he did in college, and B, he looks good while doing it, I'm not as worried about the undersized stuff. Devon, Achane and Bucky Irving are kind of proving that to us. Like, that was the one concern about both those guys. Not that are they productive? Do they look good? Did they carry the load? None of that was the concern. The concern for those guys was, can they, their body frame, they're a little bit small. And they're kind of proving like it, if a team doesn't care about that, it really doesn't matter. If you're good, you're just good, right? So Um, I like RJ Harvey a lot. I think he fits better into a zone running scheme versus a gap running scheme, zone, inside outside zone versus, power or man running. So just someone that I really like. Keep an eye on him because you'll see him. He's very far down the list on draft boards, big boards, and all of that in terms of running backs. One because of how deep this class is. Also, I think the biggest concern with him is the pass blocking. You see the pass blocking efficiency there, which is 90, even though it sounds good, is not very good. He gave up a decent amount of pressure and hits and sacks to his quarterback when he was in pass blocking. So that is going to be a concern. If he can't pass block, that's going to limit how much he does get on the field. But can he be like an early down type of guy? I think so. I really, really do think so. Into some two wide receivers that I really like. We have Jaylin Noel. It's not Noel. I believe I said Noel in a previous video. It's spelt like Noel, but I think it's pronounced Noel. I'm pretty sure. Iowa State. Iowa State has a couple wide receivers coming out, and I like both of them. Jaden is the other one. Jaylin Noel. I keep wanting to say Noel, but Jaylin Noel. He projects to me to be a slot guy. You see him here, 5'11", 200, Jaylin Noel. You see his production in 2024, 80 catches, over almost 1,150 yards, 8 touchdowns. So extremely, extremely productive. Has been productive at Iowa State for the last few years. Had a 17% dominator rating. Now, dominator for wide receivers does not include, obviously, rushing yards. It only includes what percentage of your team's passing offense, receiving offense, were you responsible for. And over the last 3 seasons, you can see there, Jaylin Noel was 27% of Iowa State's passing offense went through him. And I think it was last year in 2024, his single season high, 33%. Like, he was super, super productive. Breakout age of 21. Okay, we usually like to see guys dominate at a younger age, but it's not the be-all, end-all. I think we're kind of learning that more and more. I do think he fits in at the slot. He's quick and kind of devastating, like his short area quickness. I'm trying to think of like who he reminds me a little bit of, maybe like a Josh Downs to a certain extent, like just like a guy that if he's on the right offense, and I think we can all agree that if Josh Downs was on a team that had a more consistent passer than Anthony Richardson, he'd probably be a startable wide receiver 3 in fantasy, right? So I see that for Noel here. You see his snaps by position there, 257 wide, 436 in the slot. I think he does fit better in the slot. Can he play out wide? We'll see. Yards per route run at 2.62. That's pretty good. It's a little bit lower than ideally where we want to see. I think the average for wide receivers that hit is at 2.7 yards per route run, but 2.62 is actually one of the higher ones in this draft class, surprisingly. This draft class is not super deep with wide receivers, in my opinion. And then a stat that I really, really like there that you can see down the list there is the contested target percentage. What is that? That is the percentage of targets that were contested. And why I think that's important for wide receivers is because I think over the course of a season, I believe it shows your ability to create separation, right? So generally, we want to see this number under 20%. Under 20% of your targets were contested. Anything over 20%, over 20, 25% is a little bit concerning. Anything under 15 is like, wow, this is elite stuff. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into it, like how many targets do you get behind the line of scrimmage, for example. That can play into it. But I think over the course of a season, it usually shows, in my opinion, is your ability to get open, right? Your ability to get open and create separation. Some guys last year that had under 15% contested target percentage, Ladd McConkey, 12%. He was a hit. Xavier Worthy, 13%. He started to come on. Roman Wilson, we didn't get to see. Ricky Pearsall was at 6%. And we saw Ricky Pearsall, play well the last couple of games of the season. Malachi Corley, we didn't really get to see. Jalen McMillan at 10%. Malik Washington, Jacob Cowing and Anais Smith, both those guys we really didn't get to see. So, a couple of guys that we actually got to see and were part of their team's game plan, they hit. McConkey, Worthy, Pearsall, maybe you can argue, and Jalen McMillan, right? Some guys that were over 25% contested target percentage, meaning they weren't maybe creating as much separation in college. Marvin Harrison, 25%. And his number in the NFL was concerning. I think about 37% of his targets were contested, so a little bit concerning there. Keon Coleman could not create a lot of separation in college. Jalen Polk, Johnny Wilson, we didn't get to see. Brendan Rice, we didn't get to see. So a couple guys there at the top that were drafted early, Marvin Harrison, Keon Coleman, and Jalen Polk, who you argue they didn't really hit. So I'm paying more attention to this. Is it the be-all, end-all? No. Is there ever going to be a be-all, end-all stat that we can look at to say that this guy's good? Absolutely not. But I think, combining that with the film and the analytical stuff, it's quite interesting there. So Jaylin Noel, we'll see where he goes. I think he might rise up draft boards just a little bit. Savion Williams, a wide receiver that I'm just a sucker for versatile players. I really am. Like, I was a big Deebo Samuel fan at South Carolina just because I loved his versatility there. It's translated to the NFL quite a bit, I would say, but they didn't really use it. Was his 2016 season is when I first saw Deebo, and I think I had 15 carries or something. But just seeing him in a game and things like that, and now the 49ers using him that way. Rondale Moore was another guy that I really liked in college. I thought he was going to be really, really good. I think his freshman year, he had over 20 carries in a season. Obviously, there's kind of two sides of the spectrum there of sometimes it hits like Deebo and sometimes it doesn't, like Rondale Moore. And, I'm just a sucker for versatile players. Savion Williams, how good of a fantasy receiver is he going to be? I have no idea. I really don't know. Is he going to be a consistent fantasy guy? I'm not sure. Could he be just a better NFL player for a team? Probably. But, man, just looking at the numbers there, 60 catches, 611 yards, 6 touchdowns, 51 carries, and 322 yards for him. You see the career dominator for Savion Williams, who it's a little bit harder to judge it because you kind of have to factor in his rushing. I want to say he was the second or third. He was the second leading rusher on TCU, and he was only 140 yards behind their main running back in Cam Cook, their running back who had the most carries and yards. He lined up at the wide receiver position. You see his snaps by position there right above his helmet. He lined up out wide in the slot as quarterback in the backfield. So he's an interesting one because he's a little bit hard to evaluate, but man, just go turn on some film of these guys. And I wrote down a couple games that you can go and watch, but just go and watch some film of him. The Texas Tech game is where you see him do a lot of production as a rusher. The Baylor game, you kind of see him, both as a receiver and a rusher. His game against Stanford, he kind of dominated through the air. That being said, you see the ADOT, his ADOT's at 6.7, which is very, very low, very, very low. And that's because he got a lot of his catches and targets out of the backfield. A lot of his catches and targets came out of the backfield. I don't know how to evaluate that in terms of how is that going to translate to fantasy football, which is ultimately what we care about. But man, is this guy awesome with the ball in his hands. He really, really is just awesome with the ball in his hands. He is a little bit older. I don't know. I can't find his exact age there. It's going to really depend on what team he goes to. He needs to go to a team that's going to utilize him. If he's just going to go to a team and they're going to say, okay, go line up out wide and win out wide, I don't think he's going to succeed. I really don't. If they use him like the versatile weapon that he is, then I think he has a chance. I really do think he has a chance. So if they just kind of play him as that outside X receiver, I'm not very excited about Savion Williams. If they're going to use him everywhere like they should, I am excited about him. But he has a very, very limited route tree, very limited. But man, he's just fun. Just go watch some film of him, and just the amount of broken tackles this guy makes is awesome. And we are heading into the last one here. I just want to remind everyone, if you are enjoying the content, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Help us get to 1,000 subscribers, which is kind of crazy to say. Into one tight end. There's a lot of interesting tight ends in this draft class. Obviously, we have the two top guys in Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren, but we have a lot of tight ends that could go later in the draft that could be something. I believe it's Oronde Gadsden II, and I believe his father played in the NFL back in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s as a receiver. Oronde Gadsden II out of Syracuse, a tight end. There's a lot of tweener tight ends here. A lot of tweener tight ends in this draft class, which, man, they're so hard to know if they're going to be successful or not, because there's a couple tweener tight ends in the NFL right now. Chigakonkwo, Jonnu Smith, Mike Gesicki. And we know that those guys are very, very talented pass catchers at the tight end position. Maybe some of the top in the entire NFL, just as pure pass catchers, but they don't get on the field as much, which is why maybe Jonnu Smith didn't play in New England and things like that. Or Mike Gesicki, we've seen a good year and then a couple of bad years. And then we see what he's capable of when he goes to Cincinnati, and Chigakonkwo and guys like that, because they don't do everything else well that tight ends need to do. You're essentially like a big receiver, and you don't necessarily have the skill set to consistently win as a receiver. So they're really tough to evaluate. And we have a lot of tweener tight ends in this draft class, in my opinion. Oronde is one of them. But man, this guy is just incredibly productive. You see his 2024 stats there: 73 catches, 934 yards, and 7 touchdowns. That actually led Syracuse, which those are crazy numbers for a tight end. And he's basically played 2 years. He's basically played 2 years in college because I believe he got hurt in a couple other years. So as a freshman, he didn't really do much. He played 8 games. And they were kind of using him as like a hybrid slot receiver, tight end type of thing. So he had to prove that he can kind of block as well. And he became like a full on tight end, right? Like they were trying to use him as like that hybrid slot receiver, and it was like it wasn't really working because he doesn't have quite the skill set to be a receiver. But they moved him to more of a tight end, and then he was awesome, right? So basically, Oronde here, he had freshman year, didn't really do much. Sophomore year, he was awesome. 60 catches, 975 yards, 6 touchdowns. His redshirt junior year, I believe, or his junior year, I believe he gets hurt. I forget what the injury was. I forgot to write it down. Liz Frank injury. That's foot stuff. So that's not good. Those can knock people out. Foot stuff sounds funny, but had a Liz Frank injury, comes back in 2024, and he's awesome again. 73 catches, 934 yards, 7 touchdowns. So basically played at Syracuse for 4 years, but really only had 2 seasons. During those 2 seasons, he accounted for 26% of Syracuse's offense. He broke out at the age of 19. He's still relatively young. I believe he's still 21 years old. And he's just really, really fun to watch. Really, really fun to watch. So just someone to pay attention to. There's probably a really good chance he goes day 3 because he is a bit of that tweener type of player. But again, if he goes to the team that's going to use him for his receiving ability, then I'm excited for him. If he goes to a team that's not, then the excitement's really going to die down. So 5 guys that I hope you will pay attention to as the offseason progresses, as the draft season starts to pick up a little bit. And maybe some of you, I know some people do their rookie drafts very early before the NFL draft. Maybe take a chance on some of these guys that people aren't really paying attention to. And, you can get these guys later in your draft and maybe they'll kind of rise up draft boards. So appreciate everyone watching, and we will see you all very, very soon.